Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, True Crime and Felines. My name's Brandi and every Friday I bring you a true crime case or mystery with one or more of my 14 felines. She's a little pissy today. This week's case deals with actually the very first case that I had followed religiously on news stations in 2002 till its conclusion. And the reason why is because one of the people accused in this crime was named Brandi Hungerford. Now, my maiden name is Hungerford and my name is Brandi. So at the end of this video, I will tell you a funny story on how this affected my life when the news broke in 2002. So let's get started. Charles Richard Chance was born in 1958 in Tempe, Arizona. He went by Rick for short. He started out with a little bit of farming, but in 1982 he started his company Empire Auto Glass, which is a company that replaces windshields. Rick was a whiz at marketing, so he really knew how to build his business up. He started giving away free meals with every windshield replacement, and he also starred in his own commercials.
Even give you 12 free delicious dinners at the famous Monty's at the Ranch.
Or Monty's La Casa Vieja with any windshield replacement.
He started becoming this kind of local celebrity from Phoenix all the way up to Seattle, Washington. So he was in multiple states at this time and his company was doing great. Now, people either loved him or hated him or loved to hate him, but either way they were talking about his company, and that was great for business. And the business grew quickly. You know, in 1982 it started out as a one-man operation where Rick was doing everything. But 2 decades later, the company was operating in 6 different states and was bringing in $13 million in revenue each year. Rick himself had a nice salary of $2.1 million a year that he would keep for himself. As time passed, Rick kind of grew tired of the auto glass business, so in 1993 he decided to get into the jewelry design business as kind of a side thing. So he got a bunch of jewelry and gems and everything and diamonds, and he would carry them around in this satchel. Well, he ended up meeting a woman in a local resort, and he would ask her to come back to his place to see his jewelry designs. Well, that was a mistake on his part because she ended up being a prostitute, ended up drugging him, and stole all of his inventory. Now, because he was a local celebrity, this incident actually made front page news in that area, and Rick was humiliated. Now, Rick was married to a gal named Christine at the time, and she was not happy. The couple would end up in a very public, ugly divorce that played out in the local papers as well. After the divorce was finalized, Christine moved her and the kids to Colorado. Now, going through all this did not deter Rick from love. In 1996, on Valentine's Day, he would end up marrying Jill Scott on the Good Morning America show. Jill Scott was a former Mrs. America, and apparently she wasn't following her duties as Mrs. America. There are certain things that when you become Mrs. America you have to follow, and she wasn't doing that, so she was kind of in trouble with that organization. Along with that, the marriage seemed to fall apart pretty quickly. After Jill's apparently falling out with the Miss America organization, she agreed to do a pornographic film years before she met Rick, and that's something that she didn't tell Rick about, and it came out in the public. Rick would end up filing for an annulment in 1996, that same year, but then a week later he pulled it. They tried to work it out, and their marriage was pretty toxic. So in 1998 they finally decided to call it quits, and the marriage was dissolved. So again, after all this, Rick decided he still wanted to get into that jewelry business. So he tried it again. His goal was to make it as big in jewelry as he was in the auto glass. Now, Rick was known to be naive and cocky and a little reckless. He didn't really learn his lesson from the first time and would still carry around thousands of dollars of jewelry and gems, and he would just show them off to anybody who asked. He stated he wasn't worried though, because this time around he made sure that everything was insured, so if they did get stolen, no big loss. So apparently trying to break into this very competitive world of jewelry design is very closed off, so it's very hard to break in. So what Rick decided to do was do what he did best and mass advertise in Arizona about his jewelry that they could get at below market costs. So he put out several ads in several papers and actually was planning on filming a commercial as well, since he was so good at his autoglass. And that's when he attracted two individuals that would eventually take his life. Their names were Brandi Hungerford and Rob Lemke. Brandi Lynn Hungerford was born in 1976 in South Korea. She was adopted by the Hungerford family at a very young age, and they brought her over to the United States, and they lived in Grand Rapids, Michigan until she was a teenager. When Brandi was a teenager, the family actually moved to Tempe, Arizona, and established roots there. As Brandi got older, she started to look for a part-time job, and she came across an ad looking for models. Now, Brandi actually was very pretty and had really long hair, and she had those exotic looks, so she was hired right away. However, as you can imagine, the job wasn't for modeling as you and I would know it. She's not on the cover of Vogue. She's not taking pictures for some ad of makeup or clothes. The ad was for a licensed escort agency. Now, this is a licensed agency, so the work was not prostitution, but it was only about one step above. Basically, what Brandi would do was that she would go to a hotel room or some client's house, and she would strip her clothes off and do some dancing. The client would do whatever to themselves while a bodyguard stood outside to make sure that nothing got out of hand. So her and the client actually never touched, so technically it was not prostitution. Now, Brandi was making very good money at doing this. However, she did not get to enjoy the money herself. Unfortunately, her adopted father, who she was very close with, had been diagnosed with cancer. Now, her mom was working at a local county jail, but the insurance was not enough to pay for his care. So Brandi took all of her money and actually helped pay for his care. As he got worse, the more care was needed. So Brandi started stripping at a local gentleman's club to make even more money, where she was very successful at this, as well as many clients requested her to be in the VIP room with them. So all this money coming in, she put towards her father's care. Unfortunately, her father would succumb to cancer in 2001 and pass away. Now, Brandi was devastated that her father passed away, and friends stated that she became a different person. That happy, bubbly person that she was now sullen, cold, and became materialistic. However, Brandi was at the top of her career, so to speak. She was making up to $1,200 per week, if not more. She was being frequently requested by clients for the VIP room and being requested as a formal escort. But it'll be at the strip club that she would meet Rob Lemke. Rob Donald Lemke II was a 24-year-old male dancer, and he was from Washington. He had sort of a checkered past. Rob had a felony assault charge that he skipped out on bail in Washington and escaped to Arizona. So he was already a wanted man when he met Brandi. Rob liked the luxurious life. He drove a Cadillac, he owned pit bulls, he dressed to the nines, he had jewelry on. He was known as a hustler in the adult entertainment industry already, and he was always making deals and side hustles. Rob had actually started his own escort business shortly after he made it to Arizona, and he recruited Brandi because he was already aware of how in demand she was at the escort place she was working for currently. When Brandi and Rob talked, they hit it off immediately and started a romantic relationship. Brandi would start working for Rob's escort service that wasn't licensed, and she still stripped at the strip club as well. Now, Rob and Brandi were enjoying their life on the upper crust due to mainly the money that Brandi was making, but Rob was always after the next big thing, the next big score, and he wasn't afraid to take shortcuts to get it. So in Rob's lust for the finer things in life, he saw Rick Chance's ad in the paper selling Rolex watches. Now, this was illegal. Rick shouldn't have been selling Rolex watches because he was not a licensed Rolex dealer. When people would ask where Rick got these watches, he would say that people that owed him money would just pay him off in jewelry and watches. However, as you can imagine, Rob was not wanting a cheap Rolex watch. He actually had plans to lure Rick in and then rob him of his inventory. Rob convinced Brandi to help him and act as the bait, and their plan was exactly what that first prostitute did to Rick, was to get him in a room, drug him. After he passes out, they rob him and walk away. So they set it up where Brandi ran into Rick at a coffee house by, coincidence, and they struck up a conversation. It finally got around to jewelry, and Rick agreed to show her some designs. Rick pulled out his satchel that he always carried with him and showed her some designs so they could get an idea of what inventory they were looking at stealing. Brandi stated she'd have to think about it and she would give him a call. So a few nights later, Brandi called Rick and asked him out for dinner. They had dinner, and Rick invited Brandi back to his place to see his full inventory of all of his jewelry and watches. Brandi kept in touch with Rob, calling him and giving him a play-by-play, and Rob was just driving around waiting for her call to act. Now, at Rick's place, Brandi stated that they started smoking some pot, and Brandi smoked too much and became too high. When Rob called her to ask Rick's address, she could not remember the street name that Rick lived on. So the heist was aborted that night. After that miserable failed robbery attempt, Rob and Brandi came up with a better plan. One that would avoid the mishaps of the first attempt and also be in a bit more private setting, because Rick had staff at his house, and so they would avoid being detected there. So Brandi called Rick again to try to set up another attempt. However, throughout the summer of 2002, Brandi had made several calls to Rick, and Rick never returned her call. Brandi felt Rick had become a little suspicious and probably was backing away because she had yet to purchase any jewelry from him. However, in August, Brandi finally got a hold of Rick and asked him to dinner. So they did. They went to dinner. Brandi was unable to get him into a more private setting, so she decided that this time wouldn't work either, and she just ended up going out on the town with him. Now, Brandi said that she liked Rick. Rick was very fun, and she didn't want to see anything bad happen to him as far as getting beat up or killed. But she said what she didn't like about Rick is that Rick would throw his money around and try to impress her or try to buy her. And later, she would state to the authorities that she was only for rent, not for sale. However, Rob was getting impatient, so Brandi had to up the ante, and she asked Rob to dinner again, but this time she stated that they should just get a bottle of wine and have drinks at a hotel, wink wink. Of course, Rick agreed to this, thinking their relationship was going to go to the next level. However, Brandi and Rob had planned which hotel to take him to, and this time Rob would be waiting at the hotel. So that night, Rick and Brandi got together and they were caught on surveillance tape checking in to the Best Western Hotel on August 9th, 2002. Rick secured the room, paid for it, and they were off. Brandi called Rob with the room number. Now, Brandi would use the excuse to leave the room that she was going to go get some ice. So she left the room and she met Rob in the hallway. Rob was wearing a mask, gloves, and he was carrying a gun. Brandi clarified with Rob there would be no violence, that you're just going to rob him and walk away. And Rob apparently agreed that there would be no violence. Brandi would state to the authorities that she never did return to the hotel room, and while she was waiting out in the hallway for Rob, she heard a pop like a gunshot. Then Rob would emerge from the room and they would make their getaway. However, some witnesses in the hotel would dispute this. A witness that was in the room next door and could hear through the wall stated that she heard a woman say, "Don't hurt him. He's not going to say anything." And then that was followed up by 4 gunshots. Regardless, they got the jewelry and they both fled. Rick's body would be discovered the next day by a cleaning lady after Rick failed to show up for a business meeting and to film his commercial about his jewelry business. When they talked to Rick's friends and some of his family, they would say that Rick had been bragging for days about this hot date he had with this very exotic woman and how excited he was about it. So of course, police went straight to the security cameras and saw Rick checking in with Brandi. When they processed the crime scene in the hotel room, Brandi and Rob didn't even attempt to clean anything up or disguise that they were even there. There was a wealth of forensic evidence all over the room. So what the authorities did is they put the videotapes out on the news to ask local residents if they know these individuals. Many tips started to come in right away about Brandi. There were so many clients who knew her because she was so exotic looking around the Arizona area, and they identified her as their favorite stripper. However, the most compelling evidence came in from Brandi's mother herself, who called into the police and said, "That's my daughter." Now, Brandi and Rob had fled to Tacoma, Washington to stay with Rob's relatives, and they sold some of the jewelry up there. Brandi then left Washington and came down to Arizona, where she was caught and taken into custody. Using her cell phone records, they quickly identified Rob Lemke as her accomplice. When police searched Rob's apartment in Arizona, they found several tags that was unique to Rick's jewelry brand. Brandi would immediately confess to everything, implicate Rob as the shooter, and even told authorities where to find the murder weapon. Apparently, Rob had hidden the murder weapon in a pizza box and then gave it to a friend. I don't know about you, but my friends give me empty pizza boxes all the time. So once Rob was taken into custody, he was saying he wasn't guilty and he didn't shoot Rick. They were having trouble pinpointing who was the shooter and who wasn't. So what the authorities did is they approached Brandi, because Brandi kept saying she liked Rick, so they thought she probably wasn't the shooter, and she said she didn't want any violence towards Rick. So they offered her a deal: plead guilty to second-degree murder and get a sentence of 11 to 22 years, and you have to testify against Rob. Brandi jumped at the deal. She ended up getting 14 years in prison. During Rob's trial, he was convicted of the jewelry theft, but the jury had a problem on whether he actually shot Rick or not. So they were deadlocked on that part of it. The state then approached Rob with a deal, and they say, look, plead guilty to first-degree murder that you shot Rick, and you will get life in prison, but have the possibility of parole after 25 years. Rick took the deal. So Rob will be eligible for parole in 2032, but he's also serving sentences for 2 other crimes unrelated to this one that he did in Washington and jumped bail for. He did admit later that he was the one that shot Rick, and he shot Rick in the chest. Brandi served her time and was released from prison in 2016. I cannot find where she's at or what she's doing. I'm sure she's probably either changed her name or what have you, but she's out there somewhere. So that is the Rick Chance case. So I promised you a story of how this affected my life. I shared the same name with her. Now, my middle name is not Lynn, but my name was Brandi Hungerford. That was my maiden name, and it's spelled exactly the same. So when this news broke in 2002, due to the name being so unique, of course, people automatically thought it was me. Now, I'm from Iowa, so I was nowhere near, but after I graduated from high school, I moved out of my hometown here in Iowa, and I moved to the big city of Des Moines, Iowa. After that, I moved to other places in Iowa, and so unless you were a close friend or a family member of mine, you didn't know where I went or what I was up to. And people probably didn't care either, let's be honest. But when the name Brandi Hungerford is flashed across national news, especially here in Iowa, and you've only known one Brandi Hungerford in your life, and it was about a stripper being involved with killing someone, your ears are going to perk up. So gossip exploded in certain circles, specifically my hometown. Now, in 2002, we had the internet, but not a lot of people had computers in their home like they do now. It was kind of a luxury, and we didn't have smartphones either. So we couldn't have the information at our fingertips to look, oh, I'm looking at Brandi Hungerford. Oh, it's not her. So it wasn't something that you could easily look up. And at first, they never showed her mugshot on the national news. They just talked about this couple in Arizona who killed this guy, and one of them was named Brandi Hungerford. I mean, social media, MySpace, wasn't even a thing yet, so you couldn't even look up profiles at that point. So I had a couple of friends reach out to me to make fun of me of the coincidence because they had my phone number, and obviously they knew that I was not in Arizona killing somebody. But I did have a couple reach out to me to make sure it was a coincidence. Now, the best story I have, though, is a couple years after this, I was in like a Walmart, and I had ran into somebody who was a high school acquaintance. Like, we weren't really good friends, but we knew each other in high school. We were friendly, and she was looking at me like I was the devil. And she was kind of shocked that she saw me as well. It was this mixture of shock and horror, and she's just staring at me. And at first, you know, kind of forgetting about this case, I just kind of smiled at her and was like, hi, not sure why she was acting weird. After I said that, she let out this murmur. I thought you were in prison. So then I realized what was actually going on. So I told her it wasn't me. We had a nice laugh about it. She seemed very relieved it wasn't me, and we went on our way. So as far as I know, I'm not related to that Hungerford family. My dad was actually adopted when he was 6 months old, and a couple of years ago, I actually found out who his actual biological father was, and an interesting crime case on that side of the family too, but that is for another video. So what are your thoughts on this case? Have you ever been mistaken for somebody who committed a crime? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please don't forget to subscribe, give a like to this video if you like what you saw, and I will be back next Friday with another true crime case or mystery along with my felines. Thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate you watching. Bye.